Hello and welcome. I'm Nathan, and today's car review of choice is a rather interesting one. Now, I know I say that a lot in the intros to my car reviews, but this one is truly an interesting one because it's from a brand that you wouldn't normally think of being sporty, especially in modern times, and that is, of course, Nissan. As we all know, Nissan is striving to keep afloat nowadays, making vehicles that appeal to most people, especially the sports enthusiasts, but unfortunately have failed. And I'm not going to touch into that subject, but the vehicle I'm reviewing today is kind of a reminder as Nissan's trying times and trying to make an effort to make things work. And that vehicle, of course, is here, the 6th generation Nissan Sentra SER, Spec V. Now, those of you not really familiar with the SCR and where it originated from, back in the early 90s, Nissan had the B13 generation Sentra, and that basically had what kick-started it all. And now that generation, of course, turned your regular grocery getter into something a little bit more fun by giving you disc brakes all the way around, a limited slip differential, and about 140 horsepower, which doesn't sound a lot by today's standards, but believe me, back in a car like that in the 90s, you were doing pretty well. Now you fast forward to the 2000s, of course, you had the 5th generation, which is the generation prior to this, which I still think is probably one of the better generations in terms of looks. But this one here, the 6th generation, which is the last generation of the SCR Spec V, looks a bit French, if you ask me. Now, it could be worse, but I still think it can look better as well. Take the front end here, you do have these nice custom headlights here. The owner of this vehicle decided to retrofit it with projectors and paint the headlight housing black, which I actually think is tasteful, to be honest, on a vehicle like this. You do have this sort of honeycomb grille at the front here. Down here, well, it doesn't look that good, but it does have these sort of laminated fog light covers, which again the previous owner had put on this vehicle apparently, and then also this fake lip spoiler down here. Now I do think that Nissan really let us down, at least in making this different from the regular Sentra. So let's have a look down the side of the vehicle and see what that looks like. From the side, this little compact car doesn't look all that bad. Actually, if anything, it looks a bit better than the front, if you ask me, because you have these nice 17-inch alloy wheels and then also the side skirt that runs along the back. Now, there is nothing like folding mirrors or anything like that. You won't get anything on an Econo car like this. At the back end here, it looks much better than the front, and heck, even more better than the side, and that's because you have this nice trunk lid spoiler. But nonetheless, you do have some extras here. You have the SCR badge and the Spec B, of course, because you want people to know you spent a little bit more to get that extra bit of power. And not to mention, like every other car from the 2000s like this, you have these clear taillights with the blacked out housing and of course the red reflectors. And then down here at the bottom you have a single exhaust tip, which is actually an aftermarket that I believe the previous owner had put on, which is still an exhaust. So we'll get a sound clip of that.
And what powers that lovely exhaust is
this Nissan's 2.5-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine, which makes 200 horsepower and 180 foot-pounds of torque. Now, this very same engine was in my 2009 Nissan Altima, and of course that vehicle is a land yacht compared to this thing being a lot smaller and a lot more lightweight, being only about 3,000 pounds. This vehicle goes from 0 to 60 in about 7 seconds, which is pretty quick. Stepping in to this sports economy car, I'm actually kind of surprised on how things feel, like the weight of the door and, just the steering wheel, things like that. I mean, this is, again, a Nissan Sentra at heart, so you have to kind of look at it through that lens in some ways, because although it is geared toward the sports enthusiast, it is, again, an economy car. Now, because this is the SCR Spec V, you do get quite a bit of nice features here. You do have these nice seats. Now, they aren't bolstered to my liking personally. I do think that they're a bit odd, especially this little sort of crotch bolster right there. I don't know what it really is, but it's a bit interesting, that's for sure. But the seat belts, they've got this nice red on them. I like that. The actual steering wheel, it is technically a 3-spoke, but it's not flat bottom or anything like that. It does have some nice red stitching on it though, which I think is a nice touch. You do have cruise control settings right here, but for some reason Nissan decided to drop the audio controls for the SCR and Spec V. I don't know why they did that. Maybe, I don't know if it was a weight savings or a cost savings at that point. The headliner itself, it's not blacked out, but it's sort of a gray material, which I think looks pretty decent. In terms of just regular things that as a Sentra as a whole, I mean, it doesn't really offer a whole lot. Yeah, you do have sort of the more premium sound system, which is the Rockford Fosgate with the 6 CD changer. You have your climate controls right here. And then also, of course, you have your automatic one-touch up and down for the driver's side here. You do have small cubbies on either front doors, which you can't really fit much in. You can't fit a drink or anything like that in there, so don't be excited about that. Now, a really cool thing about sort of the storage in this vehicle, though, is that you do have this nice sort of red velvet cubby here on the driver's side, which is kind of unique. But then you go over to the glove box and it's just a regular cheap old glove box, so I don't really get the logic there. And then of course you have your regular storage cubby here in the center. No automatic headlights, things like that. You do have a little bit of quirkiness to this interior, though. I find some odd things here, like the center here. You do have this sort of sliding cup holder gadget, which you can adjust for multiple bottles, which I don't really think is gonna work. I think it's more of a gimmick rather. And that the really cheapness of the Sentra is showing through with this really cheap handbrake here. I think it looks just awful, and not to mention that it is just basically a hole for things to fall into when you lift it up. And then you have a little tray down here, and then of course the shifter, which I'll get more into later during my driving impressions. Now, everything else here, again, you can sort of work your way up to the top here. You do have a couple extra things, though, that the SER offers, and that, of course, is your oil gauge and your G meter, which I don't really think makes all that difference in a vehicle like this, but Nissan threw it in there anyways. You do have vanity mirrors on either side with both lights on either side too, which is pretty cool. And then not to mention, you do have this really interesting pull out for your CDs, you know, CDs, those things that you used to listen to back in the late 90s or 2000s. Yeah, so that would live up there. And then not to mention something odd about the sunroof. You only have one button to control the entire sunroof, so you have to kind of finagle with it a little bit to get it to where you want. And it doesn't open or close like midway. You have to basically have it fully shut or fully open, which is a bit odd. I'm pleasantly surprised how much space I have back here, considering this is a compact econo car from the 2000s, but yet I can have the seat set to my driving position for someone who's 5'11", and I can still be perfectly comfortable back here. I have plenty of knee space, and I can also move my feet up and down nice and easily, no problem. In terms of amenities back here, there's nothing really noteworthy, because all you have here is just these nets on either backs of the seat, and then there's no storage cubbies on the door cards, or even a center armrest that doesn't have that back here. You can adjust the rear headrest, but that's about it. So let's go check out the trunk and see what that's all about. There's not a whole lot to mention here with the rear trunk. You know, you don't have rear folding seats. You do have instead a cross brace that runs along the back here. I'm assuming that's for structural rigidity and helping with the performance. Whether or not it actually makes a difference in a vehicle like this, I don't know. But you also don't have anything else like a 12-volt power outlet. You do have a donut spare tire and an emergency release, and that's it. It's now time to take this SER Spec V out on the road and see what it's got. I'm gonna put on my nice red seat belt. Sounds pretty good if you ask me. That's different exhaust. Out on the road here, I'm actually surprised a little bit by this vehicle, because looking at from the outside, it doesn't look like a very fun car, but yet it can be. And I put that lightly, because it can be in the sense that if all these stars are aligned, you can actually have a little bit of fun with this vehicle. Now, in terms of its drivability, it has a little bit to be desired in that area, and that is, of course, the transmission. Now, the suspension and everything else, it feels fine, but the transmission, more or less the shifter, is kind of, well, dull. It's not really as much as I want it to be. It's a bit clunky. It just doesn't feel right in the hand. Now, it's not the shifter explicitly because the owner had put that in here. No, it just feels like it's a bit of extra work to put it into gear, and not in a good way, because I know some people like having that extra mechanical feel. This one doesn't feel mechanical, though. It feels more just like a, I don't know, clunky, I guess, but not in the good way. Now, another note on the transmission and why I don't think I really care for it is I think it's just because it's where it's mounted, and that is more up high in like the Pontiac vibe and the Toyota Matrix. You may have recognized that as well. Now, that aside though, I do feel like the way it shifts and feels, the clutch that is, it's pretty good. I mean, I can't fault it for that. It's on point every time, and it makes the vehicle feel a little bit more alive than what probably a regular Sentra would. Now, because this vehicle is equipped with the limited slip differential, just like the original SCR was back in the 90s, it feels pretty good around the corners too, I will admit. Now, despite the fact that I'm not on a lot of twisty roads like I normally am today, I still feel like even just driving in a straight line, the power is down where it needs to be, especially in going around traffic here like I am now. Now, this engine being a naturally aspirated engine is honestly one of my more favorite types of engines. I do like turbocharged engines sometimes, but a naturally aspirated engine, it feels so good, especially down in the low rev range. You do have that sort of that initial power, you know, and it's not all torquey and, you know, gonna light your hair on fire, but you can feel the difference. You can feel that little bit of power there, at least in a vehicle like this, being small and, you know, only weighing about 3,000 pounds. But nonetheless, though, I do feel like they've done a pretty good job with pairing this engine with this vehicle. I mean, could it be better? Yes. I mean, the fuel economy is not the best. You get about 9.8 liters per 100 kilometers in the city and highway combined, and that's about 24 miles per gallon for those of you using the Imperial system. But otherwise, I feel like they've done a pretty decent job with the overall driving characteristics of this vehicle. I mean, it isn't a GTI. It isn't a Honda Civic Si. You know, it's something different, something unique, something special. I mean, is it going to win a lot of people over? Maybe not, to be honest, but I do think that they have something sort of unique here. I mean, definitely something at a price of its own that you really can't compare the other two offerings on. So, the Nissan Sentra SCR Spec V is not your Golf GTI. It's not your Honda Civic Si. It's uniquely Nissan, and I mean Nissan of this era. It's where it looks a little bit French, and also it's not super performance oriented, but yet it's an economy car. Remember, the Sentra is an economy car. That's what this car is meant to be. This car was meant to reach those who couldn't afford those other ones. And I think, although it's not the best looking, and that it could use a bit of extra things here and there, I think it's not the worst option out there. And considering how much they go for nowadays, which is practically nothing, I feel like if you're just a kid starting out and you want a cheap car that maybe can have a little bit of fun, this vehicle is definitely in that category. So, if you're looking for something that's fun, somewhat economical, and can put a little bit of a smile on your face, definitely check this vehicle out. And I hope you enjoyed today's car review. If you did, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and also consider subscribing so that way you don't miss any future videos like this and also other car projects and reviews on my channel. And until next time, take care. Bye now.